Revolutionary War. But by the time it came now to draft a new constitution and to set the course for the new nation, the men at that constitutional convention were very much aware of this history. They had lived through it. They had seen people's incomes, people's estates wiped out, all of their savings wiped out. They saw the economy destroyed. They won the war, but the economy was in a shambles. And so they resolved never, ever to allow this nation that they were creating to follow that same path again. They talked about it during the debates, and there was no question, if you read those debates, that they intended to prevent this from happening ever, ever again. And when they wrote the Constitution, you can see a remnant of that resolve in Article 1, Sections 8 and 10. They said, Congress shall have the power to borrow money, to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin. Remember, foreign coin was still circulated in the colonies. And fix the standard of weights and measures. Then they said, no state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, meaning papers, IOUs, or make anything but gold and silver coin, a tender in payment of debts. End quote. Now, I think every high school kid can read that and figure out what it means. Only gold and silver coin, a tender in payment of debts. That's money. And you have to go to Harvard before you can't figure this out. You have to become a Supreme Court justice before it gets confusing. And they say, I wonder what they meant by that. And what, to coin money? Well, let's see. To coin a phrase means to invent it, right? So maybe that's the kind of coining they meant, you know, to create money out of the mind, perhaps. And so you get all of the eggheads in later years who have a vested interest in not understanding what this means. And they pass Supreme Court decisions and laws, and then they ignore certain other laws. And so we wind up in the mess we're in today. But the fact of the matter is that the Founding Fathers had a very clear resolve. And although it's unfortunate they just said that no state shall coin money, they could and should have said, nor shall the federal government coin money. Obviously, they're not going to restrict the states and give this dreaded power that they were working so hard to prevent, give it to themselves or to their progeny. It just doesn't make sense. But they didn't say, nor to the federal government. And so that was another little loophole that some of the intellectuals of later years began to work on, open up. Why gold and silver? Why is that such a valuable thing for money? You can argue till you're blue in the face whether there is something else that would do better than gold or silver. And I've heard many excellent arguments. But historically, wherever people were free to choose, and that's the element, free to choose, not have it forced on them because somebody decided that something else is better. Wherever there's freedom of choice, all societies which had access to gold and silver evolved into the selection of those precious metals as the backing of money, or to become the medium of exchange. It's not because they read a book or because they went to school and learned about it. It's just trial and error over hundreds, if not thousands, of years. And there are reasons for that. You don't have to agree with it, but there are reasons that are pretty obvious, because these precious metals have qualities that are highly desirable for a medium of exchange. First of all, they have intrinsic value for themselves. I mean, you may not have any use for gold or silver. You can't eat it, as they say, and that's true. But still, it has intrinsic value in jewelry, in industry. There's always a demand for gold and silver, particularly silver today, because it's highly in demand for electronics. And they're used as additives in metallurgical compounds and so forth. There's always demand. So it has intrinsic value. The next thing is that it's not perishable. Boy, this is really important. You know, there's wheat will eventually rot, although I understand that if it's stored, like they find some wheat in the old pyramids or some of the tombs that have been protected from oxygen and it's still good. You can take some of these old seeds and plant them and they still have life and they grow again. But generally, you know, unless you've got a pyramid, which most of us don't, wheat will eventually rot. Old weevils will get into it. So it loses its value over time. Cows have a problem of this kind that's very perishable. They get old, they get sick, they fall, they break a leg, they die. So you have to utilize a cow pretty soon, otherwise it's of no value. But gold and silver never perish. They're always there. In fact, if you were to go to wherever the storehouse of gold is, we've all seen these pictures of these stacks of bricks, bars of gold. They tell us that they're in Fort Knox, but I don't believe that for a minute. Wherever they are, you can get pictures of them. If you were to go in there, and if there were some way to drill a little hole, any of them, and pull it out, and if they had DNA and you could track back their origin, you would find that most of the gold in those vaults was mined over 1,000 years ago. Still there, still perfectly good. Another 1,000 years from now, it'll still be perfectly good. Gold, silver, all the precious metals. So it's valuable. That's another quality of it. It doesn't perish, doesn't lose its value. Thirdly, it can be divided and redivided and recombined again. It can be divided into smaller units. You can cut it down into little tiny chips, into little tiny coins, or you can melt it and put it back together again. It's tremendously valuable in that fashion. You can have a room full of it or a little piece of it in your pocket, and it serves that function as money extremely well that nothing else can do. And unless you're talking about computerized allocation of money. Now, of course, with computers today, you can take almost anything and divide it mathematically into digital components. But you can't deliver it in that fashion. Somebody said, well, okay, I want my 1/100,000th of an ounce of uranium or whatever it is, but you can't really deliver that. So, okay, it's scarce. We'll talk about that in a moment. Some people say, well, there's not enough of it. They say that's a problem. There's not enough gold to back up our money system. They don't get the point. The point is the scarcity is what gives it value. If it weren't scarce, it wouldn't be useful as money. And the more scarce it gets, up to a point, the more scarce it gets, the more valuable it gets. Because it means that you can have great value in small quantity. And in your hand, in two hands, you can hold enough gold, pure gold, to buy a house. It's amazing. There's great quality and great value in a small space. So, oh, and finally, the most important thing of all, it can be precisely measured. You've either got a 1 ounce coin that's 1 ounce of 999 pure gold, or you don't. There's no question of opinion about it. There are scientific ways of measuring it. And that's not true of just about anything else. And you can have diamonds, for example, and you can say, well, what's the diamond worth? You take it to 5 different jewelers, and they'll look at it and say, well, and they'll give you 5 different valuations. A jeweler will say, well, that's a beautiful blue diamond. And the next jeweler will say, well, it's not really blue. It's either flaw over there, and it's all opinion. But with gold and silver, you can measure it. There are scientific instruments that can do it. And that is an extremely valuable function of the medium of exchange. And you put all of those things together, and those are the reasons that historically every society that has access to gold and silver has, through trial and error, evolved into accepting that. Now, the result of that is that gold and silver as a medium of exchange, wherever it has been used, has resulted in long-term price stability. The reason for that is that it takes human effort to mine gold and silver. I'm just going to stop saying gold and silver, just say gold, okay? You know I mean silver as well. It takes human effort to mine gold, and it takes human effort to do just about everything else for any other goods or services. So you're swapping something of like value, so they keep in sync with each other. If it became easier to produce gold than it did to produce shoes, for example, and you could get more shoes by producing gold, and more people would go into gold mining, and then the quantity would increase, and then the value would go down.